They really brought us look through the past 10 years. And I would like to zoom into the past 3 years, actually, since the Hong Kong virtual asset policy statement. To be very honest, this morning I described it's like a 3-year journey of learning, collaborating, and strengthening. Now I would like to add 3 words: experimenting, merging, and bridging. Up next, we are shifting our gears to another exciting segment of the 3rd chapter. We are having 3 powerhouse keynotes that will inspire and expand our horizons. Please join me in welcoming the next keynote speaker, Scott Moore, founder of Gitcoin and Public Works, whose work has definitely empowered thousands of developers. If you are also a lover of scientific fiction, the topic is very fascinating. Do blockchain dream of electric shape? Please welcome to the stage. Thank you.
All right, hello. So we're really switching gears here, but I think this is a really interesting topic, an important one in the context of mass adoption, because I fundamentally believe that one of the biggest drivers of mass adoption in the next few years will be by machines. So we will have, obviously, a lot of users on the blockchain, but I think a lot of it will come from actual AI agents and machines that we're using together. And Land's work, Nick Land, is very relevant to this in the context of his work with the CCRU, which I'll get into in a second. So Nick Land is a very esoteric and slightly controversial figure, especially in recent years. But his work actually coined the concept that a lot of us know as acceleration or accelerationism. And Land's work was not necessarily techno-optimist, it was not necessarily doomer, but it was something that he was of the opinion was a realist view of how machines and capital would merge together into the future. And acceleration, according to Land, is essentially this inevitable progression of these 2 forces over time. And they're sort of intertwining into the future. And in short, he sort of submitted that machines will be what belong to the future, not us. So very controversial take, very accelerationist in the frames that we know today. And what he said specifically was that what appears to humanity as the history of capital is, in fact, an invasion from the future by an artificially intelligent space that must assemble itself from the enemy's resources. And so this was part of his work with the CCRU, which was emergent in Warwick University in the 1990s. They were a pretty esoteric group as well. So rejecting traditional institutions, they analyzed culture, technology, and economics as part of evolving systems beyond human control. And they saw ideas as essentially executable code. This was pre a lot of the memetic stuff that we see today. People were talking about these ideas of hyperstition, of sort of bringing the future into life. Before this was something that was fundamentally known by a broader community. And what we see today in crypto is largely successful hyperstitions. We see protocols, we see deterritorialized applications, and we see a reinforcement of these sort of different applications or building blocks across each other. In this sense, we see sort of an autonomous ecosystem emerging, and we see an ecosystem emerging that is being written fundamentally more by machines and algorithms than it is by us, I would argue. And so in this sense, as cybernetic organisms ourselves, as users of technology, we have a natural drive to produce higher orders of structure and become deeply interconnected with this narrative and start building and sort of reinforcing these narratives ourselves. This is both a really great thing and also a very dangerous thing. Because even though we have, AI agents, DePIN, DeFi, L2s, restaking, gaming, NFTs, possibly dank sharding, we really don't have a clear picture of how these fit into the eventual future that we're building. And this all started from Bitcoin, which was itself a sort of hyperstition. It was sort of just memed into existence and created off of no initial value, like most money is, most capital is. And in this Landian sense, we sort of see machinery as developing through capital and with capital in a way that may or may not be dangerous to us in the future. but will fundamentally persist without us if we're not careful. So what Land said is essentially if machinery is conceived transcendentally, again, very esoteric, as instrumental technology, it's essentially determined in opposition to social relations. But if it's integrated imminently as cybernetic techniques, it redesigns all oppositionality as nonlinear flow. And what that means, in short, is essentially if we let technology work for us and run with it without being scared of it, and just accept this flow, it will lead us in a direction that fundamentally brings humanity forward. And if we are too particular or careful about it, we will end up falling into disrepair. And I'm not sure that I necessarily agree with this, but I think right now with a lot of the memetics we're seeing in crypto, it feels like technology is potentially running us versus the other way around. And so this is sort of the technogenesis, xenogenesis dichotomy between the sort of the initial result of Bitcoin and then this future of these 8, 10 things that we're seeing on the left-hand side. I think that fundamentally, although Land may be right about this, we have a lot of memes that we're not necessarily combining together into a coherent narrative right now, and we should be pretty careful about that moving into the future. But fundamentally, all these memes rely on cryptography, and cryptography is essentially a language that capital speaks in. So if we're going to assume that Nick has some points with the idea of hyperstition and with the idea of sort of machine gods as he's describing them, we should assume that blockchains will have a pretty relevant role in the way that machines interact in the future. And we should basically be careful about what those machines do, whether those are AI agents, whether those are blockchains themselves. So this is fundamentally where I think we have to sort of think about which sort of hyperhuman future or unhuman future do we want, and how accelerationist do we really want to be? In Nick's view, we don't have a choice. We will simply be governed by machines, and machines will use something like cryptocurrency to manage that flow of capital. Or, in the more decelerationist views, perhaps we can sort of escape some of those natural, inevitable consequences. And this is just a kind of cultural meme map of various different futures that, the sort of rough internet has come up with. But I think that fundamentally, we can recalibrate this. We can kind of choose which direction it goes. I don't agree with Land that this is inevitable, but I do think this is going to be something that the general culture is already working towards with accelerationism and with these general ideas of machines and capital being intertwined. And I think if we're going to be, kind of building in the Ethereum ecosystem in particular, we should take the values of Ethereum to heart and try to be a little bit more humanist in the way that we approach it versus the way that other chains or other ecosystems approach it. So, in short, we probably have 2 years, according to the SF accelerationists. A lot of that might lead to crazy bioweapons. A lot of that might lead to crazy forms of new robotics. This basically is a report that was published recently by Slate Star Codex and adjacent people in the Bay Area. It's essentially pretty doomerist, but I think that it's actually not entirely incorrect that we're getting to the point where AI is actually starting to run a lot of our daily lives, and we should be pretty mindful about how that's going to be used in Nick Land's sort of estimation to potentially hijack us from the future. So I'm just here to say we should try to be more agentic. We should try not to be consumed by hyperstitions. And I think that involves us fundamentally being more resilient and more cybernetic. So viewing technology as something that we can actually engage with more directly and control versus the other way around. And I think especially as we start to see more people kind of like succumbing to accelerationism or getting really deep into this mindset of gods and machines, we're going to need more and more of that sort of pushback, because at some point, we're all going to be using AI. We're all going to be getting results from our various agents. We're all essentially going to be largely taking that into our cognitive security and deciding what we want to do in the future based on those results from those agents. And if we don't actually design the right agents, they will essentially control us versus us controlling them. and they will have the capital to decide then how we control each other economically as well, if blockchains in the negative outcome are successful. So I think this is the message I want to kind of leave people with. We should be very careful about how we're creating and combining these technologies. There is sort of a natural flow that Land would say is happening, but it is not necessarily too late to prevent the cybernetic agent overlords from taking over. And I would appreciate that everyone here takes that to heart and builds in this sort of AI native age with that in mind. So thank you.
Thank you, Scott, for the very inspiring and electrifying session.